Hey everybody, welcome to the show. How are y'all doing? Excuse the voice that you're going to be hearing a lot of tonight. I am a father of three. So, you get to listen to my voice be a little bit more sultry, a little bit more rough around the edges. Some of you might enjoy it. Some of you might not. Either way, this is what you got. So enjoy it and be happy. Who dat? God bless. Welcome in. Happy that you're here. I really am. We'll see how long the stream goes tonight, just based on the voice. But we do have some things to talk about, including some actual Saints news. Yes, literal, not figurative Saints news. We've actually got some for you. We're also going to go over OTAs started today. That's exciting. Yes, believe it or not. We've got New Orleans Saints players wearing football uniforms. That's about all they're doing, but they are in uniform, and that's good. Which we did have rookie minicamps, a week ago? So we kind of already saw a little bit of that, but now we've got everybody coming into voluntary OTAs. So there are, I think, 82 of the 90 players on the roster who are currently participating in voluntary OTAs. Should you want 100% of people there? Maybe. But again, it's keyword voluntary. There's also a couple of injuries that are, listing some people out, whatever. No real big deal, I don't think. I don't think anybody's really going to fuss too much about that, but we'll go over that today. Let's get some who das those who are in the chat early on. It's always appreciated to have some of our regulars here, especially as we're getting deeper into the offseason. Like we talk about being in the offseason, but the truth is the average football fan clicks off as soon as the season's over. The hardcore fan clicks off when the draft is over. But the diehard fan never clicks off, and they'll be listening through June. They'll be with us through July, August, September. Those are the diehards. Those are the ones that every team needs to be there. That's the one that every team needs to survive. Those are the people who are going to be season ticket holders. Those are the people who are buying jerseys. Those are the people who, even when you bring back Pete Carmichael after the man said that he wasn't going to be your coach, and then you bring him back again, they're still like, oh, hey, we could actually win the playoffs this year. That's the diehards. So shout out to the diehards. That doesn't mean I'm shaming anybody else. Appreciate all of our fans and appreciate everybody listening to this channel. But there's definitely categories of fans and how devout and crazy they get. So shout out to the diehards. CJ, Rainey, Marie, Mr. Jerry's here, James, Griffin, 992, Ghost Dad, Rudy. By the way, Jerry, shout out to Jerry. Jerry is not only a diehard, Jerry is like crazy. When I say crazy, I mean in the literal term, but I also mean like metaphorically, because this man follows like every Saints podcast that exists. I don't even know all the names, but Jerry probably does. So shout out to Jerry, who's not only a diehard, but needs so much Saints content that they literally make sure that they have some way to absorb that every single day. So shout out to him. That's pretty freaking dope. So just got surgery with a dental on a puppy late night. Okay, Rainey, I'm assuming I read that right, but who that to you? Bim, good to see you, 992. You're just a tire kicker? No, 992, you a diehard. Get out of here. Get out of here. So let's start with the basics. New Orleans Saints, Los Angeles Chargers, again, are going to be having joint practices. Now, for those who don't remember, this has actually happened with New Orleans and the Chargers for many years. This is something that we actually saw multiple times with the Sean Payton, pairings with LA, and I think it's going to be right before week 2 of the preseason. So in August, they'll have joint practices the week leading up, and then they'll play the preseason game. New Orleans has done this a lot. The last time we did this was, I believe, 2019. We did 2017, 2018, 2019. I know we've done it 3 years in a row. Haven't done it in a couple years, obviously, with the Sean Payton leaving, the Drew Brees leaving, Dennis Allen taking over. Haven't seen it with the Chargers, but this is something that used to happen pretty regularly, especially in the Alvin Kamara era, should we call it that, the Ryan Ramczyk era, the Marshawn Lattimore era. So having that, I'll always enjoy joint practices. I think that you get a little bit more of a competitive edge. I think from a player evaluation standpoint, joint practices serve you better than regular practices to just give you an idea of how your guys are. Because let's just be honest, unless your name's Michael Thomas taking a swing at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, usually you're not going to go full bore against the guy across from you. Now, there are exceptions to that. An exception, like I said, Michael Thomas. An exception, Trevor Penning. Trevor Penning over here just trying to disrespect people in training camp. When it's your own team, you usually don't see that. But you will probably see more of that in a joint practice settings. That's one of the reasons I like it. Whether it's with the Patriots, whether it's the Green Bay Packers, whether it's with the Los Angeles Chargers, I like it. Spawn Nation, good to see you. Former Raiders fan here for the long haul. Hey, appreciate you, man. I mean, I am really hopeful for Derek Carr. And one thing that I am actually going to do here on the show is we're going to play a soundbite from one of the interviews here earlier today. And because I do want to talk about Derek Carr here at OTAs and how I feel he's really helping assimilate to not only his new role, but I really feel like he's assimilating to the city semi well. I mean, it's very early, so I'm not going to hype the man up. I don't want to hype anybody up too much, but it does make me happy to see and hear some of the things that he has said. And I'll play those here in a little bit. So, yeah. Also, if y'all hear like a weird popping sound, apologies. I do have a Paul's throat drop in. There you go. It's your ASMR, me playing with the plastic bag. I'm sorry this episode's going to be a little bit off, but I do apologize. But keep my throat smooth so we can get through this. Teacher, good to see you. Always lovely. Gotti, always love to see you as well. So we've got joint practice coming up, and we've also had the start of voluntary OTAs. Now, because I know everybody's going to be curious, let me go ahead before we even start talking, because I know y'all are going to want to know, but injuries / who's not participating. Let me give you the list of names that was not spotted today, and this list is also backed by multiple people, so I'm pulling from Ross, pulling from Tripp, etc. But Taysom Hill, Michael Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, JT Gray, Demario Davis, Nick Saldiveri, Ryan Ramczyk, James Hurst, and Andres Pete. So those are the ones who are not at voluntary OTAs as of today. Now, a couple of those things to note. Demario Davis is in the facility and has been working around with other workouts. Michael Thomas is in and around and is on pace from what they've said, and the whole plan is to have him there for training camp. So I wouldn't worry too much about OTAs. Just like last year, the plan is to have him in camp. Nick Saldiveri is going through a minor injury, just making sure that's all taken care of before dropping him in. So some of those others I don't have full knowledge on, but those are ones that I did go and ask about. So there you go. Those are the names that are missing right now, and I'm already ready for the chat to go crazy. But, you know, because Gotti says, who bothers you from that list? And personally, not a single name bothers me. The only name that I would want to be out there performing right now is Nick Saldiveri, because he's a rookie. Other than that, I don't care. I don't think Taysom Hill needs to be at voluntary. Like, look, yes, you should be there because it's your team. You do want to contribute. You do want to make sure that you're working on building rapport, etc. But do I think that Taysom Hill needs voluntary OTAs? I don't. Does Marshawn Lattimore need voluntary OTAs? No. Alvin Kamara? No. Mario Davis? No. Do I want them there? Of course I do. Keep in mind that not practicing on the field in front of the media is not the same as not being in the facility. But none of those names make me go, oh, I'm concerned. You know, so a lot of it's probably going to be expectation. Now, if you're listening and you do have somebody on that list that you go, hey, I really think that they need to be out there performing right now, which completely fair. You are more than entitled to your opinion on that. A-okay. If that's the case, drop it down in the link below. So if you are listening live, if you're a Saints fan, who would you prefer to be on the field right now? Like, so what in that list of names, and let me go ahead and repeat it for you. Who in this list makes you go, damn, really wish they were out there? Taysom Hill, Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, JT Gray, Demario Davis, Nick Saldiveri, Ryan Ramczyk, James Hurst, and Andres Pete. Who in that list makes you go, yeah, we really need them on the field, and I'm not happy that they are not there? And if there's honestly nobody, that's completely fine. And I knew, you know, I knew this was going to happen. Here comes TJ, who talks about Michael Thomas is not there. Tired of people acting like it doesn't mean anything. Yet him and Jameis are noticeably off. Look, to me it doesn't, but I think this comes down to expectation. I don't have a ton of expectation for, and I really am trying to say this in a way that isn't, I don't want to sound insulting. I don't have a ton of Michael Thomas expectation. Like, I don't have 1,000-yard receiver expectation. I just need the man to be here and healthy. And he was never planned to be active in OTA, so that doesn't bother me. If he's not active in camp, that bothers me. You know, So I'm okay with that. So I'm not bothered by Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara. None of those names personally bother me, but I understand if you want them there. I think voluntary OTAs, it needs to be remembered that it is voluntary. This is not something seen as overly critical to any team, yet it is a important step, I think, in terms of gamesmanship. I think it's important in terms of building the rapport with your fellow players, especially new players, to be there. But if you're a veteran, especially, all these guys that we're listing that have been with this team 4 years or more, I don't think it matters at all. So if anything, the one that, if I had to pick one that bothers me, it's not Michael Thomas, because again, it goes down to expectation. If I had to pick a name that bothers me, it's still Nick Saldiveri, because here's the thing. There's 4 offensive linemen on that list. James Hurst, who's either going to be your starting left tackle or arguably your number 1 backup on the left side, and Andres Pete, and starting right tackle Ryan Ramczyk. So if I had to pick a name, it's the rookie who I do believe will become a starter in New Orleans within 2, maximum 3 years. I really believe that Nick Saldiveri's tape shows a guy who is going to be a starter in this league. So he's the one that makes me go, yeah, he needs to be on the field. But again, voluntary OTAs, I'm sorry. I know it's a podcast. I know we probably want to get a little bit more hype and get a little bit more, this is why they're not putting me on, ESPN or anything, because I'm not over here talking about LeBron James when the Nuggets are dominating and Jokic's doing triple doubles and talking about, oh, could LeBron be retiring? No, talk about what's relevant. I'm not as good at sensationalism as a lot of other people. So it doesn't bother me. I think I tend to focus more on the positives, and the positives are honestly that I think OTAs went well. Now, as we get into OTAs, real quick, let's talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Derek Carr. So I'm going to play auditories. Y'all be able to hear it. I'm going to play something Derek Carr said in his presser this morning, and y'all can kind of go from there. He's talking about coming to the city and what it's been like experience-wise. I do think this is one of the things that makes New Orleans special.
Everybody's so nice. Everybody's so friendly. I've unpacking a lot of boxes, a lot of people coming in and out of the house and helping with certain things that I don't have the skills to do, and all those things. And I just sit there and just chop it up with everybody. They're like, wait, are you David? No, Derek. Yeah, you're Derek. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm Derek. He's like, wow, welcome to the city, and we'll sit there and talk for 5 minutes. I just I love people, and so just everybody's been so friendly. That's until I, throw an incompletion, but everybody's so nice right now. But it's been a lot of fun. The food is amazing. I wish I could pronounce all the names of where I've eaten, but I'm learning. But it's been good. Everywhere we go, everybody's so nice to our children, and we'll go out and people are like, how old are your kids? And me and my wife, we're in California so long, it's like everyone lives in their own little bubble out there. Whereas here, it's like, oh, we're all family, and that's what I'm used to. Growing up in Houston, that's what I was used to. And so it's been cool because it's just a family dynamic that you don't really get everywhere. And so I think the people in New Orleans have something special with how close they are and how friendly and how nice. I mean, we got people bringing us ice cream sandwiches for the kids, and I'm like, all right, that's enough, like cookies and all this. But it's special because you don't get that in every city in the in the United States.
So obviously, for those who just came in, that's Derek Carr speaking a little bit earlier today. One, give a shout out to Houston, which is, wish I was Louisiana, but close enough. Honestly, there's a lot of I-10 transplants over there in Houston, where for a long time I really dissed on Houston food and everything, but it's gotten better. It ain't Louisiana level, but it's definitely gotten better. So shout out to him giving Houston a shout out. But I mean, the truth is, we've talked about the same thing on the podcast a lot. So I'm glad that Carr is experiencing it. And he even, one, I love that he can play and make some jokes. If you didn't hear, he's like, hey, everybody loves me. I haven't thrown in completion yet. And, joking aside, for those that don't know, today at OTAs, he was 8 for 8 in team drills, which, again, talk about things I think that get over sensationalized a little bit. How accurate a quarterback is in voluntary OTAs with no pads and stuff, but still, it matters, I guess. He didn't throw an incompletion today. So, yay. Hey, shout out. Love it. Happy for you, buddy. Good. But realistically, I think that this is awesome. I think that him acclimating to the city, I think the city embracing him is always a great sign. And there's definitely, and I've told y'all about this before, because I think we appreciate it, but at the same time, I don't understand, or I don't think that everybody knows that it's not really like this everywhere. Like thankfully, when I did work in this sphere, in terms of sports journalism and even in other careers, having traveled the United States quite a bit, let's be honest, man, it's not like it is in New Orleans. And New Orleans has a lot of its own problems, right? Like the crime rate, busting the windows, the murders. uh, New Orleans is not a perfect city by any stretch, but in terms of family and community, that has always been a staple of the city and the region. And it is true, man. There are definitely places you'll go where nobody cares that you're there. You're just there, and you only interact with people that you have to interact with. But that's not how it is here, and it's fantastic, And I've talked about it before. One thing that makes New Orleans special as a football city is you will go to the grocery store and see a player. Like, I know for those of you who have lived here in terms of Louisiana and Southern Mississippi, who have been in and around, that might not sound like that crazy of a deal, but that does not happen in a lot of places. It just doesn't. Um, there are different cultures when you get to different places, and I don't want to turn an entire episode about that, but I do think that it's great that the city is showing him that he's getting that, family feeling. And people saying, does that matter when it comes to football? And honestly, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I think it depends on the player, but I love it nonetheless. I think it's something that helps makes New Orleans special, and that's something that I definitely want to give some love to. It's one of my favorite pieces about the city and about the region, and one of the reasons that when I covered the Saints, I didn't really want to go to another team. I used to joke around that, hey, if somebody offered me 120 grand to go write for the Falcons, I probably would have, because hey, you got kids to feed. But generally speaking, I was just ecstatic for the entire culture of what this area provides to their football team. And it really is something special. So I'm glad Derek's getting that. But in terms of how he performed today, Derek Carr did go 8 for 8. He's also looking hella jacked. I know that doesn't matter for everybody, but for some of the ladies and men of our chat, it does matter. And let me just go ahead and put it on the screen for you. Yes, this man looks ripped. Oh my goodness, you've not seen a quarterback like this since Taysom Hill. But it's like you took Taysom Hill and you fusion danced him from Dragon Ball Z with the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, or insert your favorite emo band, because the eyes, man, I could just never get past it. But man's jacked, and also completing passes. Also, it's hilarious to me because he has such a short last name. Those 4 letters are big as hell on your forehead, sir. We need some longer last names because it's just hilarious to see that big. But anyway, there you go. He's on the screen there. So he did perform well in early OTAs, and I think that matters. It's kind of like we talked about in the rookie mini camps. You had Jake Rayner looking pretty solid early on, like, oh, maybe something there, maybe something there. And now we're talking about Derek Carr looking good. And at the end of the day, while it might not matter in the grand scheme of things, maybe OTAs doesn't matter. Maybe voluntary doesn't matter that much. But I will tell you this. You'd much rather be watching and see a guy being, or Hayner, by the way, not Rayner, seeing a guy be successful and completing his pass and doing the right things. Then we're talking about OTAs. Oh, man, Derek Carr missed a pass. We hope he gets that sorted out by training camp. So that's a positive to me, honestly. It's not something that I think that necessarily is going to be game-changing. Like, oh, we knew back in May that he had it. But I do think it's definitely better from our perspective when we're looking from the outside in to see a guy starting off strong. It's better to see it now than wait till later. So that's a positive for me. Again, I do try to take everything with a grain of salt because I'm not here to boost up and really try to overstem and overhype OTAs and voluntary workouts. But definitely good to see. Bim says you would have been a super biased Falcons supporter. This is probably true, Bim, but I'll tell you this, man. I would never stop being a Saints fan, but money does a lot for loyalties to sports teams. There are some things that money can't buy, like loyalty to my children. As much as I love the New Orleans Saints, if you tell me that I'm going to feed my children, I might be a little bit more loyal to Atlanta. I would still struggle to wear Falcons memorabilia, but I would compromise, and I would wear the colors black and red. So there we go. Tess has just started listening, didn't look at the screen. Legit thought Deuce had a guest speaker. Yeah. The beard is growing out a lot right now. Ted, let me know what you think about it. I don't know how long I'll keep it, but it's definitely growing. And then it doesn't help that the voice is super deep from being sick. Yay, kids. 902 says, I remember when walking down the street and seeing Baron Davis, all I said was, what's up, Baron? And kept it moving. That's one thing I will also say, 902, is for the most part, our fans also aren't like beating down the walls, phrasing, of our players. I mean, we're polite. We give them a shout out. We'll dap them up if they let us, but we're not just sitting there trying to take 30 minutes of their time. Like, oh my God, you're my favorite person in the entire world. Would you sign my kid's forehead? And I think that's also part because we've been raised around this, right? Like, it's not weird. But if you went to New York right now and Aaron Rodgers is walking down the street, he's probably getting just surrounded by a bunch of people. Thankfully, that's not how it is here. And every now and then that does happen, sure. But, it's probably the current Saints player I've seen the most in New Orleans when I'm around is Cam Jordan. Dude's everywhere. Now, right now, I think he's not in Spain now, but he was in Spain for like the entire offseason. But that would be the guy that I saw probably the most in terms of just random occurrences in the city. It's just fantastic, right? It's just awesome. I love that. Joe says this time is to get relationships built in the locker room. Who dat? Love your honest opinions and conversation on the channel. It's like bros talking ball. Love it, Joseph. Glad that you enjoy it. And I think that's the key too. Again, I'm not going to get super crazy over like, oh man, Derek Carr went 8 for 8. Did you see how he hit Chris Olave in May? But what I will say, it is good to build that rapport. And let's just talk about it from a football standpoint. What are you really building here, right? Let's talk about that. So when we talk about rapport, on-field rapport is not just knowing a guy. It is getting timing down. And one thing that you can start building on in voluntary OTAs is getting that timing down. I think often because, one, we don't have a lot of writers. I'm not taking shots at anybody in New Orleans. I'm just talking about greater end of the sport. They don't really go and talk about this. But when you just watch some of these highlights that'll come out of training camp or OTAs, you're just seeing receivers running routes. But nobody ever really explains what are they doing? Why does that matter? And it's not something as simple of, are we checking is the quarterback accurate and can the receiver catch the ball? What you have Cody Burns doing, wide receiver coach, and what you have like Ronald Curry doing, quarterbacks coach / the passing game coordinator, is you're doing several things. It's not just checking Derek Carr's accuracy and making sure that he's got that repetition down. It's also, hey, Derek Carr's 3-step drop needs to match when we call Chris Olave to run this 12-yard post or this 7-yard hitch. We need everybody to be down. So if this 3-step drop needs to match this route, we need to do this repetition to make sure it hits. If it's a 5-step drop, if it's a play action boot, this is all timing that has to get formulated. And you can do that early on in OTAs and before training camp in t-shirts. Like, you don't have to be going full pads to work on timing. So that's part of the actual football reason for getting in. The biggest thing, honestly, is building the rapport and working on those little things. It's not something that directly translates to winning football games in terms of what you did in May definitely made you a winner, but it's setting a foundation for what you need to implant on later on. So that's kind of like, if you do want to just get really crazy and be, I talked about at the beginning of the show that there are fans, hardcore fans, and diehard fans, but if you really want to, like, hey, my role as a diehard fan, what is something that takes me to the next level? Well, if you want to watch all this, preseason tape and training camp tape, and you want to look for things, start looking for that. Like, do you notice, hey, are the routes a little bit off in terms of the depth? Maybe, for example, is Rashid Shaheed, as we look at him to become a better wide receiver, watch him right now and compare him to established wide receivers. If we know that they're having Chris Olave run this 7-yard hitch, we'll compare the two. Does Shaheed's 7-yard hitch look as good as Chris Olave, or even vice versa? When it comes to ankle flexion, hip flexion, the ability to sink, dip, and transfer energy from when you're in because if you are running full speed, your center of gravity is higher. You've got a lot of energy up top that you have to transfer to the ground so that you can stop quickly. Well, that's part of a hitch route. So is he doing that as well? These are the things you want to look for, that it doesn't matter if you're in pads or not. You can start to see that, whether it's transferring on the field or whether it's improving on the field. So those are the things I'm looking for. Like, when we talk about we're looking for a receiver to get better at route running, we're not just saying they need to get better in terms of like, hey, go run this 12-yard post and catch the ball. It's the little things. How does he look on his break? Is he adding anything extra in terms of his release at the line of scrimmage, like a hop step? Is he using a dyno stem when he's doing a long break down the field in an interior route? That's what you're looking for. And, that's something that I really wish that we had more people just go instead of trying to harp on and like, oh, let's talk to Pete Carmichael or let's go talk to Dennis Allen. Somebody go hunt down Cody Burns and be like, hey, when you look at Rashid Shaheed, what is something that you're working on to make him the best that you can make him at, say, the 12-yard break on a post route so that, or, honestly, probably a little bit longer, 15-yard break on a post route to make him dominant in the Yankee concept? Somebody go ask that damn question, okay? Now, there are definitely people in our sphere here in New Orleans who are talented enough to understand what I just said. Nick Underhill, Ross Jackson, even, Mike Triplets. There are definitely people who are there to do that. I'm just saying, like, for me, and this is how you can tell that I'm a diehard, because I want to know that type of content. I don't want to just know hey, was Foster Moreau better while he was in Oakland/Vegas than we had with Adam Trautman, which is actually something that Gotti answered. And honestly, yes, much, much better. But context is important. Context is important. Honestly, if I had to give you something that Adam Trautman is better than Foster Moreau at, because we do want to be honest, run blocking. Run blocking, run blocking. Woof. Foster Moreau's tape is not good with run blocking. Adam Trautman's was better. But in terms of being a receiver and a threat, and even to an extent pass blocking, Foster Moreau is better. So these are all, I think, very important things to ask. And just to give you a shout out real quick, God, if you haven't, I did put out a film study on Foster Moreau. My film studies have been a little bit slower here the past couple weeks because I've been sick, but still also working. So just apologies for that. But if you haven't yet, I put that out, I think, May 12th. So it's been right at 2 weeks ago. But I did a film study on Foster Moreau to show you some of the things that he does well and how some of those things can translate to what he will be doing in New Orleans if you haven't given that a look just quite yet. But realistically, yeah, I do think he's better. But at the same time, you do have to learn how to do things in New Orleans versus how you did it somewhere else. Because you might not have the same job here in terms of, yeah, sure, New Orleans runs a West Coast offense, and Derek Carr has run a West Coast, especially under Gruden, but is it the same terminology? Is it the same design of, say, when we're doing a boot, are the route designs the same for certain plays? Are the tendencies the same? Do we expect you to hit a quicker drop and then release? Do we expect you to use just a quick pump fake to pull a receiver? You got all those timings down? So all that's important. You could go to another team and have a similar system and do worse. Or you can go to a team that plays a system that's better or more advantageous to your play style and do better. So all of it's kind of, and I don't want to say it's all over the place, but it is, there's a lot of details and context that you kind of have to pay attention to. Gunham says Carr looking great in drills, and I'd agree. He's definitely looking good in drills. Again, it's OTAs, but it is early, and if you do want to talk about what's looking good, what's good, that is something to give a shout out to. And there's some great sources that are kind of covering that, so far this season. NOLA football. Sorry for that, y'all. But New Orleans Football, if you want the website, has got some great pictures going through notes from all the camps. All that has been really fun and really enjoyed it. So if y'all haven't checked that out, check it out. It's all good. It's all good. But yeah, I'm excited about it. I need a quarterback to be clutch in the fourth quarters. If you remember, that's one of the weird things about Derek Carr that we looked at is, for whatever reason, his performance in trailing situations and in close games and in fourth quarters are superior to when he's just playing from a blank slate. We took a pretty deep analytical dive into Derek Carr a couple months ago, and that was just like one of those weird, shocking things. Like, wow, that's a little crazy. That's a little odd. But yeah, that's a little wild. So something to pay attention to, if you will. Cordell says new position coaches, new players. We need all players on board, locked in on chemistry. And I agree with that, Cordell. Now, I will say there aren't a ton of new people. Tight ends coach is different with Clancy Barone. You've also got your offensive line assistant is different with Jari Evans from Zach Strief. Most of your offensive guys are the same. You do have new defensive guys with Joe Woods coming in and Todd Grantham coming in to do defensive line. You've also got Marcus Peterson, who is running the secondary now. So you do have some more defensive coaching changes. I would hope that nothing's really gone too different there. And what I mean by that is you would hope that because this is Dennis Allen's team and he's a defensive-minded coach and he's been dominating as a defensive-minded coach for years, that nothing really changes in that regard. Like, you would hope that is the case. So positional coaches, in theory, yes, they matter, but you would hope that there's no fall off by losing Ryan Nielsen and And losing Chris Richard, we'll see if that's the case. There wasn't really a fall off losing Aaron Glenn. And I don't think that's a shot to those guys. I just think that's because Dennis Allen, this is his thing, and he has a system that works. I wish he was as good at head coaching as he is D coordinating, and maybe he improves in that regard too. Technically, he did. Last year, he won 7 games when his career high as a head coach was 4 twice. So maybe he is getting better, but I will say that the defensive positions, I'm not honestly that worried about. It's the offensive ones that I'm definitely more concerned about. I think everybody is fan-wise, but you are right. This is when you want to get coaches on the same page, players on the same page, get everybody's system installed, and just see what ends up happening. So, yeah, 992 says OTA, just like warming up, it's not physical. Preseason is when you get chemistry. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like the warm-ups before you get going. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's completely okay. I'm warm up before training camp more than preseason. But either way, I do think it's important. I think it's needed. So, yeah, I think it's needed. Aaron Glenn's doing a great job. Yeah, again, 902. Nothing I was said was meant to be a shot because I liked Aaron Glenn when he was here. I had no problem with Aaron Glenn. I really didn't. I had no issue with Aaron Glenn at all. So I just believe in Dennis Allen's defensive system. I would go as far as to say Dennis Allen as a defensive coordinator. This is tough because you do have the Dome Patrol years. But purely as a defensive play caller is top 2. Top 2. I mean, Vic Fangio, when he was here as a linebackers coach, there's some great names from old New Orleans Dome Patrol days that are still around today. But yeah, this is I just think that he's done great there. I just wanted to translate more from the head coaching perspective. I want more wins. I want more consistency. I want better performance when it comes to tendencies, and having better tendency breakers. Anyway, let's keep it moving. That's why after a while they put Taysom in to throw deep. That man can't throw deep. That man can do a lot of things really well. Taysom can do a lot of things really well, but throw deep is not one of them. That man throws up a lot of Aflacs. Lots of Aflacs. Gone are the days of stacking the box against the Saints. Hopefully. Again, I'm not here to count my chickens before they twerk. And do I think that this wide receiver room is better than the past couple of years? I do. But I am not about to go crazy. I'm not about to get, super hyped. I just talked about how I wasn't going to get super hyped about Derek Carr. I'm not going to do about the wide receiver room until it's proven on the field. But, yes, in theory, you are right. There are more threats on this team between Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau at the tight end positions, and Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, maybe Edwards, Michael Thomas, if he can play this year. That offensively, that doesn't count our trio of really good running backs, what could happen? But I do agree with you. I do think that the running game can be legit. And I do think that the receiving game is superior on paper. But let's wait till that paper translates. And also, Greg Williams was also good. Greg Williams was great for 1 year. And not to take away from Greg Williams, but Dennis Allen's been great, like legitimately good / holy crap good for 6 years. Like, that is a level of consistency and success that New Orleans is not used to. And again, not trying to take away from what Greg Williams did. And obviously there's a whole bunch of stuff with the whole Greg Williams thing. And keep in mind that Dennis Allen was also an assistant on those Greg Williams teams. But Greg Williams was with New Orleans for 3 years. And I do think that he was very good, but I don't think that he was Dennis Allen good either. One thing that Greg Williams did, he was extremely aggressive, especially in 2009, and forced a ton of turnovers, and that's great. So I'm not taking that away. Arguably, 2009 in terms of turnovers is still one of the best years ever defensively, but you've had 6 years of really good defense from Dennis Allen. So, I'm just going to put it down like that. And honestly, I know that turnovers are super important, but if I'm just being realistic, there are multiple years in the past 6 years that I would take this defense over that defense. Now, I would have taken that offense over our offense hands down. But the defenses that Dennis Allen has been fielding have been ridiculously good compared to what we're used to. Have they been the best defense in the entire league? I don't think there's a single year where I would say that they're the best defense in the league. But in terms of New Orleans Saints, if y'all been a fan of this team for any amount of time, literally any amount of time, there have been 2 years in the team's history where they were number one in terms of defense points allowed. And there have been 0 years in the team's history where they were number one in terms of yards allowed. In their entirety, like literally ever, there have been like, I think 12 years in the entire history of New Orleans where they were a top 10 defense in regards to points allowed. That's the entirety. You know, some of those years, 2021, 2020, 2022. 3 of them, technically, I'm sorry, 4, because 2017. 4 of those are Dennis Allen years. Now, again, this does kind of speak to how bad New Orleans has been historically on a grander scheme. But basically 30% of your top 10 points allowed years, which to me is a more important metric than judging defenses by yards. For whatever reason, the NFL still does this. They judge how good your defense is based on the yards you allow. But points allowed, to me, is a far more important metric. This whole game's about scoring and stopping points. 4 of your historical team's best years have come under Dennis Allen. So again, I'm not trying to sit here and be like, awesome possum, Dennis Allen's the best coach in the world, because I do have a lot of opinions in terms of how he's performed as a head coach so far. But as a defensive coordinator, I want to give him his props because I've been a fan of the team for a while. I know it's wonderful that a lot of fans now have gotten to grow up used to successful Saints football. But I'm 33, so I'm old enough to remember bad Saints football and good Saints football. And there's some of y'all who are old enough to remember nothing but bad Saints football, and you still say the Saints suck to this day, even though you've had basically 2 decades of very good football. So anyway, all that to say, look, Dennis Allen does get a little bit of not a pass, but he does get more room to improve versus what I would give others because he proved he could be a better defensive coordinator, right? And, you know, one of our commenters here in the chat was talking about, look, you want to build rapport between players and coaches in places like the voluntary OTAs. And hell, I'd agree with that because if you look at, just from a coaching perspective, if you look at what we've had with Dennis Allen, I think you've had, and maybe y'all will disagree, this is fine, but I think you've had one of the few times that you've been able to track a guy who's gotten better the more years he's been in the league. And an example of that is look at what he's done historically, both as a head coach and a defensive coordinator in the league. Here, example, I'll pull it up for you. So 2011 was DA's first defensive coordinating job, right? 24th in points allowed, 20th in yards allowed. That's not terrible, but it's not world ending. That's his first year. Now that's with the Denver Broncos. Then he goes to Oakland for 3 years as the head coach, similar to what he is here in New Orleans. His defense was 28th, 29th, and then 32nd in points allowed, and 18th, 22, and 21 in yards allowed. Not great. Then he comes to New Orleans and basically reinvents himself. He comes to New Orleans and dedicates himself to being a defensive guy. Here's how it changed. In 2015, he came back to New Orleans. Remember, he was with New Orleans, 2010, 2000, et cetera, with Greg Williams. He was a secondary guy. And first year, 2015, Rob Williams is still the DC. You've got kind of co-DC here with Dennis Allen. And that year, this team was 32nd in points allowed, 31st in yards. But then 2016, slight improvement. 2017, it really hit. His system was fully installed. It was his second year as the sole guy, and the team was 10th in points allowed and 17th in yards. And they went 14th in points allowed, then 13th, then 5th, 4th, then 9th last year. One of the few times you've been able to see a literal progression of a coach getting better. We talk about this from players all the time, but there's so many times you go look at a coach's records and they are who they are. A good example, who's a coach that we always kind of make fun of? It's probably shouldn't, but we do. We probably shouldn't do this, but we do it anyway. Jeff Fisher. Let's talk about Jeff Fisher real quick. The man hasn't coached in the league in like 7 years. He's still taking shots. Oh God, do I feel bad? Kinda. Do I feel bad? Not really. Um, but look at his history. Remember, he was a defensive coordinator first, and he had a studly season as a DC his first year. But he's all over the place. His first year as a DC, fifth in points allowed with Philly. But just go 5 years later with Houston, 12th. Okay, not terrible, but a little bit off. Let's go 4 years later, 25th. Okay, 3 years later, 30th. But 3 years later after that, 8th, then second. So all over the place. Like, where's the consistency? Doesn't mean he can't be good, but like just woo, woo, woo. So it's like, make up your mind. You're going to be good or you're going to be bad. And with DA, it's been pretty consistent that when he devoted himself to defense of that side of the ball, he got better basically every year. And you hope that he could do that with head coaching. Hopefully. Who knows? Definitely not a guarantee, but I do like I like to err on the side of being positive versus the side of being negative. Cordell bringing us back around. Appreciate Cordell. Says, I'm definitely disappointed that most of the starting O-line is absent. We're still not healthy enough to participate in OTAs. And I get that. We actually asked at the beginning of the show, who's not there that bothers you? And I'm personally not worried about missing a voluntary OTA, but I completely respect and understand those who are. And just to reiterate, the 4 offensive linemen who are missing: Andres Pete, starter; James Hurst, I don't expect to be a starter, but primary backup; Ryan Ramczyk, starter; and then Nick Saldiveri, your new rookie, who I do expect to be a starter within 2 to 3 years. So when basically half your list of voluntary OTA day one in terms of who's missing is offensive line, I can definitely understand, being concerned. But I'm not terribly concerned either. Most of the guys on that list are hardcore veterans who don't need this. Again, to reiterate the full list for everybody: Taysom Hill, Michael Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, JT Gray, Demario Davis, Nick Saldiveri, Ryan Ramczyk, James Hurst, Andres Pizza. 10 of them. I think I said 8 earlier, but there's 10 of them. Basically, everybody there is a hardcore veteran. JT Gray's been here forever. He's your special teams captain. Demario Davis, defensive captain, linebacker. He's 33 years old. I don't need to press him super hard. Marshawn Lattimore, starter, veteran, Pro Bowler. Taysom Hill don't need practice. Like, I think Taysom Hill at this point, you just save him for the game. Like, we know exactly what you are. Go. Here, put on pads. Go run over an Atlanta Falcon. That's what he does. So I'm not terribly worried in May. Now, in August, I might be right there with you, Cordell. If we're talking about the same thing in August, we might be, but, like Ryan Ramczyk, I'm not bothered at all, because I would have to go back and look, but there's been multiple years Ryan Ramczyk didn't do voluntary OTAs. Multiple times that he sat out and been completely okay, ready to go game day. So we'll just wait and see how that ends up going long term. So Williams didn't get a chance. He's historically good. I don't think he is, Joseph, though. I think we have the reason that as Saints fans, I know we're kind of bouncing over here. The reason we as Saints fans say that Greg Williams was historically good is because we won a Super Bowl. And it's hard for us to leave that. And I get it. But honestly, Greg Williams was not historically good in any statistical measure and even on-field measure. That doesn't mean he was bad. Be very clear about that. I'm not saying Greg Williams was secretly bad. But Greg Williams was also not, and nor has he mostly been his entire career, a top 10 defensive coordinator. Now, he has had great years. But let me give you an example. This man has been coaching in the league since the late 90s. Most recently with the Jets as a DC, in terms of as a high-end position. So he's been in the league a while, and he didn't miss much time, because remember, he went to be St. Louis's DC like 3 years after the whole bounty stuff. But his best ever defensive ranking was second, and that was with the Tennessee Titans in 2000. If you look at what he's done the past 10 years, which is with, by the way, 5 teams, his last 10 years coaching, the best he ever put up defensively was 13th. That's with 5 different teams. So if his system was truly that special / elite, it would have shown up more after the fact. Now, I'm not calling him bad, because he's definitely had some great years. Buffalo and honestly Washington is probably where you saw the most consistent success from Greg Williams. But was he historically great? No, but he was good, and he was really good for a short era. But then he wasn't. and I'm not just trying to dump him, but I think that we've built this idea on Greg Williams because he helped win a Super Bowl. And that is a legitimate, 100% accurate statement, and that's completely fine. But was he truly historically great? I don't think he was. I think when you think best, I'm trying to think of a list in my head right now. When I think the best defensive coaches in the NFL, I don't think, or I truly don't. I don't think Greg Williams. I don't think he's bad. But if I'm talking about the top 5 coaches who have had defensive systems consistently be great, and especially for a long time, he's not in the list. Doesn't in any way, shape, or form say that he's bad, because that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that this dude sucks, but is he great? Because I think when you mention great, you're putting somebody on a special level. Is he great? No, he's not great. You want to know an example of a guy who deserves to be called great as a defensive coordinator / head coach? Bill Belichick. Truthfully, Bill Belichick is not super great with offense, but he definitely has a system that he runs in New England that has managed to find the playoffs with multiple different people. But if you look at him historically, this is one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinators ever in terms of just play calling. He's had multiple number 1 overall points allowed defenses. Almost every year has been top 10, no matter what players he had. That is greatness. That is consistently, holy crap, good. Greg never did that. Doesn't mean Greg was bad. But I do think that as Saints fans, because we tasted greatness, we tasted the Super Bowl, our mentality is immediately, Greg Williams is great, but I don't honestly think he was that great. I just think he was good, and that's fine. That's completely fine. Completely fine. He was good with an aggressive, opportunistic scheme. But also, after he left New Orleans, he never really found success running the same scheme with I think 6 different teams. So anyway, we got on a little weird tangent, but you know what? That's May and June podcasting because sports. Hey, Hoodie, good to see you. Mr. Don says, I like Hunter Renfrow, but I don't see a need. We wouldn't be able to all of our receivers on the field. And then Slim also comes and say, I don't know if you've already mentioned it, but what are your thoughts on acquiring Hunter Renfrow? So real quick, what we might do, because we are getting close to our wrap-up today, we might open up the phone lines Thursday and do an in-depth Hunter Renfrow conversation. My thought, I have 2 opinions on Hunter Renfrow. The number one I'm going to pull up is the spot track real quick because I don't remember his contract, but I do remember it's semi-decent. So his contract, if you were to pick him up right now, his contract is worth, his cap hit is $13 million. Dead cap 18. And yes, the New Orleans Saints could afford it because they do have that in cap space. But I do believe their current plan is to roll that cap space over into next year. But you do essentially kind of have a 1-year deal because he has an out in his contract for 2024, that a team out. So you could maybe work with that. It depends on how you want to look at this. And here's why I say that. Hunter Renfrow is very similar to, in terms of how he's used on the field, as Michael Thomas. Split end who also operates down in the slot. I could even argue that the Raiders used him too much in the slot, like last year. Is he the game changer that Michael Thomas was at that position? No way. No way. He's way too small to be a game changer. He's one of the rare split ends who is undersized and has played the position. He's a guy that most will automatically peg as a pure slot guy, but if you look at his lineup, he's performed and done decent on the outside. But would I personally trade and go after him? No. But it does come down to this. As much as I love Michael Thomas, and I do I place faith in Michael Thomas at this point after years of injury? And no, I'm not blaming him for that. Just stating a fact. No, I don't trust Michael Thomas right now. Am I trying to call out MT? Hell, look, if Michael Thomas gets offended by my red-bearded dad bod ass who can't go out there and run 100-yard sprints with him and that makes him great this year, then cool. He can dog me all year long as he's catching passes. Truly, dog me to death. Just drag my name through the damn mud. But I don't trust him going on 30 years old, having missed multiple seasons. So I understand if they feel that even with Michael Thomas there, there's still a potential need for having a receiver who can provide playmaking ability 17 games. So if that's where you lay in terms of belief, then it makes sense. You know this guy can operate inside and out. Do I personally want him? No. There's other guys I'd really go after who I think fit better. But that's a name that's swirling around a lot. And obviously Derek Carr likes him because they've played for years together. But just because a player likes a guy doesn't mean I think that they should get a role. It's one thing to bring in, Edwards, really cheap contract, and I wouldn't call him a journeyman or anything, but he's not bringing in a big cap number nor big expectations. But he still gives your quarterback that, hey, I really like that guy. Could you go and get him? And you feed him a little bit. And you did that with Foster Moreau. I don't feel like you need to take every skill position that the Raiders have had that Derek Carr loves and put it on New Orleans. I think you need to put the best team out on the field. And I don't necessarily think that Hunter Renfrow does that for you for multiple reasons. But he says, question, with A.K. Jamal Miller now, do you think we keep 4 running backs? And if so, does Washington make it again or Eno makes it instead of someone else? So counting fullbacks, typically the Saints keep 5 running backs. And that was very, very, very consistent with Sean Payton. Whether that sticks to being the trend for our current guy in Pete Carmichael, we'll have to wait and see. Last year, though, going in, you kept 5 running backs. Like going into the season, you had 5. Last year was Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, Dwayne Washington, and then Tony Jones Jr., plus your fullback. I probably think that same trend stays unless the running backs that are there don't provide any level of special teams play. Because Jamal's not going to play special teams. You're not going to have Alvin Kamara play special teams unless he occasionally returns the football. And maybe you risk your picking Miller, but more likely you use something like Washington or Eno to do that. And Dwayne Washington has the most experience as a special teams guy. But I think they keep 4. Hoodie, the question is, who's that 4th guy? And I'm not, at 5, if we're counting our fullback and Adam Prentice, who I don't really see any other fullback making the roster. Maybe they do. But I would say that, yeah, I expect them to keep 4. The question is, who's the 4th? And right now, there's a lot on the name. So you got a lot of people have actually mentioned this name multiple times, but you got Sir Roderick Thompson. Some people like Ellis Merriweather is a name. You got Eno Benjamin, and see what happens, right? I tend to think when I look at running backs, I'm kind of going to lean towards, hey, go for the young guy, go for the new guy. I think that's just a position that doesn't tend to age well. Like if you don't have a lot of people pulling a Caden Ellis path at running back, right? Like they're not just with the team 4 or 5 years and then they pop off. That doesn't really happen with running backs. So I'm leaning and looking at some of the newer guys like Eno, especially if they can contribute in special teams. But we'll wait and see. I think it's really open, though. I think that 4th spot could be anybody. So if you're looking to make the Saints roster, there's your spot. Now, Kalen says this year Traquan gets cut. When I look at the current roster, I don't see where Traquan stays. Unless they just really, really love his blocking, which that was a Sean Payton thing. I don't know if it's a Pete Carmichael thing. But right now, here are the current wide receivers you have on your list. There's a lot of them. But Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, Keith Kirkwood, Traquan Smith. Yep, we're going to keep going. Kawan Baker, Brian Edwards, Kirk Merritt, Malik Flowers, Shaquan Davis, James Washington. You got a dozen guys right now. That's a lot. I think that the team carries 5, maybe 6 into the season. And I think that Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, and Brian Edwards are probably your 5. Unless something happens. So they'd have to keep 6. And if they kept 6, I would actually lean towards Malik Flowers for special teams reasons. I know this is Locked On Saints all over again. So if you carry 6, I think it's Malik Flowers who's that guy. So I obviously didn't rattle off Traquan Smith. But we'll see. We will wait and see. That would be my list if I pumped him out. That's if I pumped him out. Edwards may not make the team. He may not, Mr. Don. He honestly may not. I tend to lean towards that quarterback thing I just kind of talked about. Unless he just looked bad, I would actually give him like that 5th spot. Again, can he contribute in multiple ways? I think he can. If you look at his career, and we talked about this a little bit. One, he's young. I mean, the dude's not old, and I like that. I mean, he was with, what, the Raiders for only 2 years. He's a third-round pick. And he's 24, turning 25. This is not an old player. Point I'm making. This is not an old player by any stretch of the imagination. So, I'm completely okay with this guy getting an opportunity, especially if he can contribute in special teams. Will he contribute in special teams? Well, you're going to have to ask the coaches that. But he did contribute in sporadic special team snaps with Vegas. So, maybe. But I'll go ask him. How I feel about D-line depth? I am not confident until I see it. I love the infusion of talent with the draft and free agency. I really enjoyed picking up Kalen Saunders. I like Nate Shepard. I don't like him as much as I like Kalen Saunders. But I loved bringing them. I love re-signing Malcolm Roach's depth. I don't trust him as a starter, but I do like him as depth. And then I love drafting Brian, who I'm calling Breezy, because I'm trying to push some Hall of Fame aspirations onto him. And then Foskey. So here you go. Mr. Don says, I prefer Edwards over Traquan. I have seen enough for Traquan. Same. See, if we're talking about keeping 5 or even 6, who do I really see on that list that I like better than Brian Edwards? Nobody. I mean, I don't like Keith Kirkwood more. Maybe y'all do. I don't. I could say Keith Kirkwood has probably got more proven special teams ability. Do I really, am I jumping up and down for Shaquan Davis? No. Maybe that changes in preseason, but right now I don't honestly care. He's a 6'5", 215 guy who may end up popping off, or Shaquan Davis. And look, I'm going to tell you right now what's going to happen. There are going to be probably multiple of y'all who are going to start popping off about this guy, even if you've never heard of him, come training camp, because he is a 6'5" wide receiver with a wide wingspan. So he's probably going to make a couple of catches that make y'all go, we've got to keep Shaquan Davis. I honestly don't even know if I like him yet. Let's see him in the actual game scenarios. But just because of his size and frame, I promise there's going to be Saints fans who like him. They're going to be like, that's the guy. And every year, there's a camp body who everybody falls in love with. All the time. All the time. It happens every year. And hell, I fall and prey to it too. Doesn't matter if it was Nick Toon or Adrian Arrington. It's happened to all of us, right? So he's the one that has the potential to be that guy this year. Now, whether that's, deserved or whether he actually does something with it, we'll wait and see. But that's a guy to watch just because of his size that people are going to start seeing some good plays. And then you got Malik Flowers, he's only 6'1", right around 200. He's a little bit smaller, but he has the potential to really pop off in special teams. And we've seen how that's a route to make this roster. Look at, Deontay Hardy when he was here. Look at, going all the way back to Beerman. Definitely a way to make this team. So let's wait and see. We'll wait and see. D-line and O-line got me nervous, especially after who healthy on the O-line right now? We'll see, man. We'll see. The annual Brandon Coleman. Bringing out the names, boss man. Bringing out the names. Hey, I liked Brandon Coleman. To me, Brandon Coleman was a guy, he's one of the rare guys that, for some reason, and I'm not saying y'all did this, but this was definitely popular amongst a lot of Saints fans on social media. Brandon Coleman got a lot of flack for no reason. Like Brandon Coleman, and I get, coming out of Rutgers, this whole thing, he was a 6'6", 220, 225 guy. But for a UDFA, he put out 3 years of film, 1,000 yards receiving, and 10 touchdowns. For a UDFA, that's the freaking dream, man. Now, he never made it as a big guy in the league. He never really made it. But, dude, Brandon Coleman's the type of dude that I would love to be, I'll put it this way, and I don't mean this in an insulting way. The Brandon Colemans of the world are the guys that end up making, great podcast or great podcast guest for your favorite team. They were only there 3 or 4 years. They were good enough to be in the league. They know what the hell they're doing, but they just weren't elite enough to last in the league for 10 years. For an undrafted guy, he caught a lot of flack. There was this expectation for him to be somebody. When he was undrafted, he managed to put out 3 years in the league and 80 catches. Hell yeah. You know what? I'm going to reach out. Maybe I can reach out and find Brandon Coleman. Brandon Coleman, will you come do a podcast with me? Is that man even still on good? See, this really sucks. I blame Elon Musk. When I had my check mark, it was really easy for me to reach out to players that I'd never talked to before, and they'd see the check mark and go, oh, they're legit. They're legit. Now it's hard as hell again. Damn it. I missed that. I miss it. If anybody knows Brandon Coleman, y'all reach out to him for me. Bring him on the podcast. Bring them on the podcast. Anyway, we've hit an hour. I appreciate y'all. Y'all are amazing. Let me just say, who dat, God bless. Remember, we'll be back Thursday. I will try to put out film study tomorrow. We'll see how the whole, voice is going and everything. I've still got to do my stuff for my gaming channel. So I appreciate y'all putting up with my voice. I'm surprised we made it an hour, but like when we get to talking football, I enjoy it so much. If y'all couldn't tell, if y'all haven't already, please do join the Discord to get more on this. Hoodie, I won't call Hoodie out because Hoodie's also like Jerry, where he's around all the podcasts, and also runs his own podcast. Hoodie, you in my Discord? If you're not, I'm calling you out right now. Get in the Discord. And last but not least, if y'all want to help out the channel, there's donate links that you can do, because podcasts like myself can't make it without y'all support. It is greatly appreciated, not required. Check out our merch store, revdeuce.com. We've got 2 t-shirts here to rep Who Dat Nation, as well as a mug, which, by the way, the mug is 2-sided. I don't think I've ever showed that, but if you look at the mug, we got the pull the trigger graphic on one side, so you can talk about the Yankee concept, but we've also got the Who Dat Confessional logo on the other. So either way, however you face it, left-handed, right-handed, you can rock your New Orleans Saints, you can rock the Who Dat Confessional podcast. Appreciate y'all. Y'all are all amazing. You really are. Who Dat, God bless. I'm going to catch you on the next pod Thursday night, and we'll see you then. Deuces.